Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rise and Grind live on Wisdom Fireside Restream, which is going to YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all those great spaces. It's so great to be here on this June 20th. Yes, that's right. It's June 20th. And what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about exactly why are people so afraid of change? That's really the topic. Why are people afraid of change? And I think it's a very, very important subject matter to really speak about. And for so many reasons, because we're noticing a lot of aggressive changes in our daily life, from gas prices, home prices. I mean, the fear is up at an all-time high, and a lot of people are not sure where to go, what to think. There's the threat of, is my job going to still be here? Technology. And I really gave this some thought back on Saturday, and I really started writing the script for this show. And that's what I really want to focus on. So I was reading The Daily Laws by Robert Greene on June 18th. And before I get into that, he made a lot of clear points about how change can be, when it's well received, it's gentle, and when it's aggressive, it's a big rejection. And when there's like too much innovation, kind of like what he says throughout his writing on page 216 of his Daily Laws. I'll talk about that in a minute. He talks about how basically, when you have aggressive change, that people will revolt in against it. And I'm seeing signs of people beginning to get angry, and it's not fun. But how has change been so embraced at the same time? So it has a good and a bad. So we really have to think about, where is that really going to take us, and why is it going to take us forward? So, you know, when a while back, when I was thinking about change, I was like, there's some things that I just love about, like, technology, and there's some things that I really don't care for. And when I think about change, it's like, yeah, sometimes I want things to remain the same. And and why can't, I've heard myself say it, and friends of mine say it, but we've all kind of said, well, what could we keep of the old into the present? And what what would we want to not change about, only the way that we live or ourselves? So I think it's a very, very big deal when we look at change. Are you a person that's going to be edited out, so to speak, or edited in? Who are the innovators? We've seen constantly through social media a plight for who is worthy. And some people are just straight up like, hey, I like having my job, I like keeping to myself, I like keeping to my own business, whatever. I'm not all up for this innovation. And then when I hear people talk about politics, this is conversations I have with my friends. When I have conversations with my friends, they're basically saying, blaming this person, that group, this leader, that leader. And why are we paying so much attention to things that don't really matter? And I said, exactly. The more that you discuss that you don't have a control over, you really have to think about what you do have control over, and how do you adapt. So before we go any further, I'm going to read what I basically read on June 18th, for out of Robert Greene's The Daily Laws. And what he says on June 18th, he says, "Never reform too much" is the title of the page. He goes on to say, he quotes Niccolo Machiavelli. He says, "It must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, no more doubt of success, no more dangerous to handle, than initiate a new order of things." Now, Robert Greene writes about, he says, human psychology contains many dualities, of them being that even while people understand the need for change, knowing how important it is for institutions and individuals to be occasionally renewed, they are also irritated by changes that affect them personally. They know that change is necessary and that novelty provides relief from boredom. But deep inside the cling to the past, change is the abstract and superficial change. and desire, but change that upsets core habits and routines is deeply disturbing them to them, excuse me. No revolution has gone without a powerful latter reaction against it. For the long run of the void it creates provides to unsettling to the human animal, unconsciously associating such as with voids with death and chaos. The opportunity to change, to renew, seduces people to the side of the revolution. But once their enthusiasm fades, which it will, they are left with certain emptiness. Yearning for the past, they create an opening for it to creep back in. It is as far as easier and less bloody to play a kind of con game. Preach change as much as you like, and even enact your reforms, but give them comforting appearances of older events and traditions. So, his daily law from his book, The 48 Laws, he quotes, he goes, if you are new to a position of power or trying to build power base, make show respecting the old way of doing things. And if change is necessary, make it feel gentle improvement on the past. And I think that's a very, very, very big, big bomb drop right there. And as I read the 48 Laws of Power, and it's law actually talking about Law 45 of his book, and he quotes, and there were a lot of things that I started to think about and change. And when you read the 48 Laws, he goes over King Henry VIII, he goes over Mao Zedong, and how these men had to deal with change and how some used it for their benefit. Now, in his example, he quotes about Henry VIII, how basically he said he wanted to divorce his first wife because she couldn't give him kids. And the Catholic Church had an opinion about that. They said, if you want a divorce, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to stay married to her. And he's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I don't have any heirs to the throne. So he came across this guy named Cromwell, who happened to be a part of the Protestant movement. Very bit small minority of religious people who didn't quite go along with what the Catholics or what their doctrines were. Like the Pope even said to himself, "Hey, you want to get divorced? Forget it, buddy. It's and you're married. That's it, done deal." So when this happened, he was like disgruntled, and he comes across this guy named Cromwell, and he ends up appointing him to be a counselor. Hey, if you want to change, why are you following a doctrine that's based out of Rome? You're here, aren't you the king of England? You know, he's basically, you can change this. And so he's like, yeah, why not? So he, again, by his aristocratic rule, he basically tells like England, hey, I'm not no longer recognizing the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, or their authority, you know. But he didn't stop there. So he appoints this guy named Cromwell, and he basically tells him, hey, make the changes because I want a divorce. There's somebody else that I'm fickle for that probably can give me kids. So he ends up doing so, and then this guy Cromwell, he becomes like this supreme, or he becomes the king's royal counselor, and the king writes off on these decrees. Hey, I ban the monasteries, all this stuff, and they end up finding out that the Catholic Church was making lots and lots of gold. They had lots of reserves, and they're like, wait, they've been taking all this money from all these people for so long. What about us? So they start initiating all these taxes and tax reforms and then religious reforms. Well, guess what? They bankrupt the monasteries, they kick them out, they ban them, and guess what happens? The poor, they scatter like all over, right? Like kind of like roaches. They get in the communities, they start begging and all this stuff, right? So he goes on to explain this like, hey, once he did that, the poor that affected like the regular middle class, what was seen to be middle class, they start begging them, robberies, chaos, and then guess what? They start a revolt. The beginning to start a revolt, and the king's like, I just want a divorce and all this. I don't care about religion really, you know. So what ends up happening is he puts this guy Cromwell in prison and reverses all his decisions and his doctrines, even though the king made it seem like, hey, this is my orders, but is really this guy named Cromwell and the Protestant, and so the Protestants were just like they became praised, but then the change came with an enforcement, and by getting rid of like these monasteries, hey, that means that all the homeless went all out, the poor, they couldn't be fed, they were getting aggressive, and they fought. And so the important aspect of that story is the king ended up reversing his decision and re-edified the Roman Catholic Church and became their basically their theology that they practice, so on and so forth. So even though the king wanted a change, it was too drastic, too fast. Is the moral of the story, and people started to revolt. And how we actually think about how that happens for ourselves, we are seeing, like, especially in the United States, we're noticing that people are really pissed off. They're like, look, I can't afford, I'm having a hard time afford getting to work, I'm having a hard time feeding my family, and then am I actually going to be able to afford to buy a home? I mean, last week in the stock market, people started, talking about how, if interest rates are so high and so is inflation, we're going to be priced out. And so people start complaining about the rich. And this is the last thing that the rich really want. So, of course, in my opinion, the politicians are scrambling to find remedies. But did they wear themselves too thin? That's really the point in the matter. Did they make it so bad for themselves? Now they have to answer to the people that elected them. Of course. And this isn't just exclusive to the United States. It's actually going on all around the world, even to the smallest countries possible. So people are trying to figure out how they monitor. But to get back to the topic of why are people afraid of change, it's, I have to break it down a little bit. And so I wrote some notes. And so let's look at the positives. Why is change necessary? As long as man here's my first point. As long as man has a question, change will always come. It's true. Anytime you ask a question, why can't something be done better? You've heard it in your casual conversations. You've talked to your mom, your dad, your Brett, your friends, whoever. Why can't we make this better? And the pursuit of man, their ego, gets them to desire, okay, let's be innovative. Now, the second point that's most important about change is the body and the mind and the spirit must meet it equally. That's right. You've heard it from me. In my opinion, I feel that the body, mind, and spirit must meet change amicably. It can't be just one or the other. You have to believe in it, you have to do it, you have to be about it. That's just the end of the day. But one thing that really affects the positive change is our maturity and good representation of change. That's something that we cannot forget. When we look at change, like, for example, you look at cell phones, you look at computers, we've embraced it to be now part of our daily culture, a daily life. Have you ever freaked out and left your house without your cell phone? Have you ever, felt kind of lost without your communicator? I mean, if you go back to the age of Star Trek, the series, and they showed the communicator being in their hand, it's like they didn't go anywhere without it. They had a little badge like, "Doot, doot, hey, hey, beam me up, Scotty." But the thing is that communication, that access is so invaluable that people will feel lost without it. And I come from an age where people necessarily grew up without it. And how do we communicate? But see, the level of information and how information travels so fast nowadays, I think that people they can't, it's like putting a vacuum and just putting a blower in your mouth and just shoveling it down. And it's like you don't have really time to really digest exactly that. So when it comes too fast, we get angry. And I've heard a lot of people, all these changes are definitely ruining our minds. I can't argue with that because that's their perceptional value. But according to Robert Greene, he was talking in the Law 45. He's like, you make it too aggressive, people will revolt. But he also refers to a story about Mao Zedong when the Communist Party took over China. There was literally, at first, he kind of embraced Confucianism, and then he ended up, when he started getting more power, he started making more aggressive and made Confucianism like outlawed. And I believe the other philosopher that he was like Lang or something like that, and the guy was preaching against Confucianism. So, because he didn't want people necessarily think, he's like, hey, the peasants, they were revolting. They didn't like that the emperor of China was doing what he did. And so, hey, the Chinese overthrew their own government. They threw out the Japanese during World War II. But what Mao Zedong did so carefully is he gradually made changes. And before you knew it, people were so in depth into it that they had no way of revolting against it. So that's the next clear point, about change. If you're not aware and you look all around you and you see things happening, but you ignore it because you've got your needs met, you're you're innovative in your own way, you're comfort in your own way, you're living your own best life. But then these things come up, like when I first heard NFTs, I was like, what is this? And then when I've heard about cryptocurrency years ago, what is this? And then bring it to a modern age. This is just an example. Um, People are finding out, like, can I really trust the banks? No. So what are we going to do? We're going to find a different way of globally investing. So we can use digital coin instead of digital dollar, or petrodollar, which a monetary system that we've been using since 1972. When in 1971 Richard Nixon banned the gold standard, he basically said that, Nixon was like, this gold standard cannot be sustained because other governments that had more gold were exchanging out for a dollar, and they just couldn't do that. So what ended up happening is they went to what's called a petrodollar, and then you get to a warp speed to a modern age, we have digital dollar, you know and so all these different global communities, businesses started creating their own currencies. You've got Bitcoin, Ethereum, you've got Doge. You got so many of them, and so many influencers have talked about these monetary systems. And so with this, people are kind of feeling like, well, what is my dollar worth? What's the paper worth? And these are things that are happening right in front of our face, that it's like, wait a second, it's interrupting my life. How can I buy my goods and services and live my life if these kinds of changes are so aggressive? But they weren't really. They were always in the background. For anywhere from, if you ever used your ATM card in the last 10 years, or your debit card in the last 10 years, you were a part of that digital change. But see, it was gradual, it didn't happen all at once, you know? So, and this is where we're going to talk about our next big part of change. Change interrupts our patterns and habits. That's right, it does. Now, we have a level of comfort, and we have our comfort zones. And when we understand comfort zones exactly, that means where I live, my family, I know my routines. But when change comes, it may threaten those comforts. Maybe the job or the position that you have is no longer relevant, can't keep you, it's outdated. For example, look at I think the best example is, look at newspapers. Newspapers are becoming scarce. Like, my even here in Stockton, California, I've talked to local community, and they would say that, the Stockton Record was a very valuable piece of information. And why? Because it was print. Now, many of us get our information, our news, from the digital platforms. That means we're watching it on cable television, we're watching it on our phones. We've got up to date minute by minute. But all that news becomes overwhelming, and then people become disgruntled about it. So they're like, well, what do I believe? And then we hear those terms, the fake news. So when we understand, that really causes a conflict on our mindset, but then our body also. Our body starts stressing out, like, what do I believe? Who do I trust? And then it becomes a belief system, the spiritual side. When we look actually at the spiritual side and growth of all things, once it becomes in the spirit, then it becomes a conflict of mind and everywhere else. But see, that's where the next very valuable point on all this, are reserves and storage of capacity of information. A lot of times you'll see nowadays in change that the average attention span is 5.6 seconds, from what I read on a survey. Why is that so important? Because if people are not willing to think about their consequences and think about their choices to change, they become overwhelmed, or they become like, hey, I'll give all away my principles just for this change. Just like how entertainment and information is going to be transferred next. Now, I was reading things about VR, and why is VR so important? Facebook created Meta the last couple of years. They've been working on it for ages. Ever since the internet really took off, they needed to think about being innovative. And so people taking a VR, virtual reality, those headsets, those, the goggles you can buy, now they're creating digital spaces where workflow, entertainment, vacations, everything. It promotes the theories to say, like, if you wanted to go see the jungles, um, or even the mountain peaks of Machu Picchu, or seeing Everest, or going fishing in a stream in Yosemite National Park, to going seeing the waves in Santa Monica, or going to Hawaii and watching Big Waimea go off. VR is creating a capacity to travel in these places, but it also is creating an identity not realistic with real people. So that's where it comes, the energy it takes for your change. As the capacity, energy and consciousness are a very valuable thing. You can't ignore it. People will constantly say, how many times have you ever heard people say, "Hey, according to my life standards, I don't have time for all this." What they're really trying to say is, I don't have availability for most of what's going on. I don't have time for distractions, but yet optimally they do. It's a choice in optimizing. Even people connecting and dating. In my day, I'll have to say that people met one on one, but now they itemize their connections based on a level of, hey, the menu. And the thing is about, like, when online dating, you can lie all you want, and then you're gonna have to prove it. People are dismissive. They don't give each other a chance. They don't give each other timing. So that change definitely interrupts. It takes a lot of energy. Um, and also what's going on, how it interrupts your habits and your patterns is that it stops reflection. A lot of people don't reflect on some of their choices, so that they stop continuing making bad choices. But also, reflection gives you that positive opportunity, which is going to be my next point, is it also can give you innovativeness and creativeness. Is a world that's now going to be a part of our permanent lifestyle. That's right, our permanent lifestyle. And it always has been. You can't stop change. Like, look, when you were born, you were small. You were probably like maybe 10 inches or 12 inches long. You probably weighed 7 pounds, maybe. That's just speculative. But the thing is, you couldn't stop your growth. And as you got older, you got bigger. You started having more consciousness. You started talking more. You started conveying things with people. You started learning things. You started making your own message. But then after a while, you start thinking about all this. And it's like, then I'm in a community. I collaborate with people. I work with people. I work with things in business. And that's where we're at nowadays. Now, me and my girl were just talking about this yesterday. The level of where people used to just get jobs and or employment, and that's what they would retire with, is almost past and gone. It's more like you're constantly playing chess pieces. But Robert Kiyosaki was basically saying in an interview, he was like, you can the system has trained you to be employees. And this is a problem. The health of financial security and thriving is based on how creative you're going to be. Starting a business may be, to my generation, is alienated, but now people are finding, well, there's no security in any job. Corporate manipulations, corporate agendas, they will blame all these things on where business really goes. But if you really think about a lot of this, you know you got to think about where you are and how you evolve. Now, me, I've got into digital spaces, I've got into podcasting, I've got into video. And the very, very important part about all of this is that I realize, if I don't stay curious and ask questions and look about being innovative, I may be out of the loop, so to speak. But no one wants us to be that. And then, so the other alternative, the next big point, people, they relate to spirituality. Well, God will take it away for me. God will solve all these problems. And hey, no shade on that. No crap talking about that, because I do believe in God. But I also believe that God gave us free will, and it's like he's not going to go and change it unless you use what he's been giving you. So I have a guest who wants to come up. Let's see. I have Tal Kavil on wisdom. Let's see what you got to say in 3, 2, 1. Good morning.
How's it going, Jason?
How are you doing this morning? And what would you like
I'm
to
doing fine.
contribute to Rise and Grind?
I wanted to say that it's being pulled out of our comfort oftentimes is what makes people shy away from change, because we grow accustomed to things being the way they are, and we master them in a sense. And it's a challenge to stretch and grow to another level. And so a lot of times we want to see things remain as they are because we know where everything is in the room. Um, I can walk in the dark and I know where the light switch is. I know where to not bump into furniture and all of these things. But if while I'm out, someone has rearranged things, then I can't walk in the dark. I hurt myself. I'm uncertain. And the uncertainty is what I think makes people a little intimidated by change. And even personally, I've seen in myself, I'm someone who's fascinated and has an appreciation for change, but it's more something I appreciate from afar. And the closer it gets to my personal space, I don't like it as much.
That's very, very
I
important right there.
right. I love to watch Jason grow and transition. However, when I'm growing, it comes with growing pains. When you're growing, I can watch you grow and appreciate it without the pain. But when I'm growing, it comes with pain. When I see change in my life, when I see my family members changing, when changing careers, that comes with some struggle and uncertainty on my part. But to just watch things change in the world, you can be fascinated. I love the age that I am because I got to see the very end of a life that doesn't exist anymore. But I also got to witness everything grow to what we live in today. And in that time frame, had I settled into what life's supposed to be during childhood, I'd be lost right now,
Mm.
because the world from my childhood doesn't even exist anymore. Most of the rules from then don't apply anymore. Even everything from fashion to grammar. We
And
live
that's
in
a
a time
big
now.
identity right there. That's a huge
Right,
identity. Like people
right.
don't. I feel that I'm 49. I don't know how old you
Uh,
are,
I'll be 48 in a couple of months.
but we come from a generation where phone was on the wall. You had to
Right.
talk to people face to front. You couldn't hide behind a screen and say things. You couldn't just talk crap without answering for your words. So,
Absolutely.
and then what we're noticing now that a lot of people are having problems, like for example, I look, I'm not against the LGBT community, but when the pronoun thing started coming out, and I was like, you're now trying to change the paradigm of what people naturally are. I don't see any other animal species doing that. But see, our consciousness, we want to negate the level of acceptance instead of saying, look, you are who you are, but don't force it on me. And now they've made it administrative to where I've seen it in legislation where they say that they want to, you're identified as a human and not as a boy or a girl. That's what you're born as. But if you want to change it later, that's your own deal. But don't
Right.
make it for us. Like that's a part of where I stand. I'm like, no, I am going to stay not gender fluid. I am going to stay a man. And if I'm heterosexual, 100%. But if I became homosexual, that's my own prerogative. I don't need to tell people. I don't need to declare it for an outside identity. And people have a problem with that. And our
Yeah. And you know what I find interesting?
Your
Um,
time's about to expire, but you can come back up and just give me a heads up.
okay. What I find interesting is that there are all these things that progress has led us to say, you have to accept this. And we do. But where is it that we have to abandon who we are? I
Right.
don't have to abandon who I am to accept you. If this is your choices, if this is your life, your background, okay, that's you. I can appreciate that. I can befriend you or not,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to still be me. And that might be the combination of how I raised and my own intuition and my experiences in life. But I'm going to be me, and I shouldn't be ashamed of that no more than you should be ashamed of who you are. I'm going to come back up if no one else is there.
Yeah, no one else is right now. But I want to say right before he comes back up, in the page of the Daily Laws of Robert Greene, he does say at the bottom of the page, preach change as much as you like and even enact reforms, but give them the comforting appearance of older events and traditions. You have to, and he does go over that. He goes over the respect value. You have to respect the age old traditions as what I mean. And how many of us have preached, especially, like yesterday was Juneteenth, June 19th. And why was it so important? As a Mexican man, as a Mexican Irish man, I can appreciate that history because it affects me and my history. But see, people are fighting to find what their history is, and they're preaching like all these things, and people are like, oh, I can't believe the history books anymore, or I can't do this and that. So now it's a negation of identity, and then people are conflicting. So they can't really accept change so easily. So I just use the pronouns as an example. I'm not against, if people want to use that, that's their own prerogative. But my thing is, don't get mad at me if I don't, I don't necessarily see it, or I'm all about it. Hey, I don't have to. It's like, hey, identify you as a person. That's what I focus on, and that's all I see. If you are trans, you're trans. If you're straight, you're straight. I don't care, because to me, I will treat you respectfully as a person, a human being. And that's what my number one focus is. So,
Right. And especially if you're talking about sexuality,
mhm,
gender becomes a little more tricky, especially nowadays.
right. Gender doesn't
Um,
equate to sexuality. And that's another discussion in itself.
right. And that's key because um, there are many examples of individuals who innately feel as though their whole life they've been in the wrong body and they're of opposite gender than what they were born.
Right.
Um, but not all of these people, it doesn't come from a place of being attracted to the same gender. Um, there are ladies who believe that they are men who, in their heart, feel as though they were born a male and they like men.
That's fine.
And,
That's,
and
yeah,
so
I don't
for
have no
me,
problem with that.
it's not my place, right? It's not my place to determine what should be right for you. However, back to the point of your talk, change is the thing that it takes time. And so I can't be where you are at its inception. Um, however, given time, I can adjust to how you have changed or how things have changed around me. But there's this thing where there's some of us that are so resistant to any change, and then there's others that are so radical that everything must change.
Right.
And
They make it
it's
aggressive. It's a power struggle, and
right,
we see people like I've seen it in a lot of our communities. I've seen how friends who are no longer friends based on their politics,
right,
or based on because I speak another language or whatever. But the point is, it's like when we make it like I have to be like, for example, the recent thing I just saw on the news, they were talking about Asian hate, and I'm like, in my opinion, try being a Latino. Try being a, I understand they go through cultural indifferences and changes. And I've heard friends, well, how can they really appreciate them when they don't embrace us? They segregate, they treat us like crap. And when we go into their stores, and I've heard, people that I've talked with, and I'm like, oh, but see, that's the mindset. If you constantly stay separated into just what empowers you and recognizes you, you can't be aware of the whole. So when these whole changes come in policies and people say that what you have to accept, people have a problem with that, and they're not going to get behind you because it's so aggressive to fight for sovereignty and power. And those things determine the flow of business, our livelihoods. And see, this is where the opportunity of change can really help us, because I
right,
learned to embrace a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. You ask me what my religion is, I'll never tell you. You ask me what my star sign is, I'll never tell you. I don't give categorically codes to classify of how you will judge me. You will address me by my presence and how you meet me and how you
I
talk to
like
me.
that. I like that. I've never thought of that in that way. So you actually introduce a concept to me, because I'm someone who proudly boasts, as if I'm a gang member, about being a Virgo, and it allows other Virgos to connect to me, but it alienates others.
But if you really think about that coding conversation, how much people do they know about astrology? You know, it's a very, very impactful thing, to say the least. And I'm not here to bag on the people that do tarot astrology. I'm not here to do that. You do you, boo boo, is what I'll say. Do you, but don't preach to me, because I've had people guess, well, you're a Cancer or you're a Gemini, and I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And even when they guess it right, nope, I won't tell you. And why?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, individuals who have studied and are more familiar with these things, if they make that assumption or ask that question and it's not what they thought it was, then they'll start to break down
What
how
do they
it is
see?
what they thought it was.
Yeah. What do you see?
It's like, oh, well, you're this. What's your actual birthday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, you are this, but you're in this stage of what, and it becomes like goofy. Like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I'm a human. I'm a man. I'm an American citizen. I got enough categories that I just came into the world being told this is what I am. And
Right. And how those describers of what we are, what we grew up with, the younger generation has a harder time accepting the older generation. I kind of did too when I was young, but then again, I really appreciated my mentors because hard work
right,
got things done. Not like, well, I'm going to rely on this prediction or I'm going to rely on, manifestation. And if people really understood manifestation, it's one of the many ingredients of the laws of attraction. But see, that number one thing, that action must take place as well as conception. And if your actions don't work for the conception, then your manifestation goes nowhere, straight up.
absolutely, absolutely,
So
absolutely. Because to manifest, it isn't simply to be physical or spiritual. There's work in manifestation. And yes, we can manifest things. We can conceive something and see it through to a real tangible thing. Um, it's very rare that it's going to happen just because we decide that this is what's going to happen. And however faithful you may be in your belief system, if I just decide I'm going to be a billionaire and I don't do anything to become financially successful,
mhm.
I'm never going to be a billionaire.
Right. And the
The
important thing
lottery
is,
isn't going to make me a billionaire. I'm not going to marry some billionaire that dies. I'm never going to be a billionaire because I'm not
there's a
doing
level
anything.
of exchanges with that goal, with that
Right,
lifestyle. And what are you, and this is what I do love about laws of attraction: what you give out and what you get back. So if you don't
right,
understand, okay, I want to become that billionaire, all right, but what I may be giving up in the long run may be much more terrifying than that goal. So I have to
absolutely.
remember that my service, me as a human being and being a part of a community, I am a more accepting individual, and I am not perfect by any means, but what I will be perfectly clear on my positions, and I will be flexible. Like Bruce Lee says, be like water. You ever
Like
heard that
water,
speech?
absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
fluid, but when I need to be the cup and I need to stand my ground, I do, but I don't inflict it on other people's persona. I do my
Right,
best. And that's the key, is if you can't recognize the other person, like we can have identities, like you can choose your pronouns, but also be respective of the traditions that people have lived this way for thousands of years. And now that it's not so convenient and you try to make it aggressive, or any other identity. Hey, the Libras must rule the world. Well, I'm like Pinky in the Brain. You know what we're gonna do, Pinky? What are we gonna do, Brain? But that's the thing. That's the thing is like if we stop trying to be the big shot, I'm just a shot, like a star in the world.
Right.
I will shine so
And
bright for so long, and then I phase out, and that's okay. I'm good with that. That's why we age and we mature. I appreciate my elders as well as the youth. I embrace the youth. I don't I don't say, "Oh, damn millennials," or, or any of that Gen A or
right.
whatever. I don't do that.
Yeah, and I think we come from a generation, is you're not much older than I, that we sort of do have a little bit of balance in that. Not to say that we're better off in any way than anyone else, but we have a little balance just because of time. Like I said, we're at the age where we witness the life that no longer exists, but we also witness the transition into what's here now. And I'm one that I embrace change that makes sense to me. But if it doesn't,
Oh, time ran out, and I'm gonna have to cut it because I'm over my time marker. I'm at 41 minutes. TC, if you can land if you want to come back and land the plane real quickly, I'll let you do that. Otherwise, time is ticking for me to get to work. But first of all, let me say thank you to everyone who showed up live on all of the streams that I'm producing to Fireside. If you're following me on Fireside, please do. If you're here on Wisdom and brand new and hearing me for the first time, I'm here Mondays and Wednesdays, usually at 7 a.m. is when I come live for Rise and Grind. So, but the thing is, I'm going to I'm going to close with my last points about change as an opportunity. And this is the thing: when we embrace and optimize our change for effectiveness, this is the very biggest thing that I could tell you that has really impacted my year. In 2022, I am having the biggest challenges of my life. But you know what? I have said through these difficulties, I will be a better person through it all. Like yesterday was Father's Day, and I didn't have my 14-year-old, and I'm going through some legal stuff with her, and I just want to see my kids. I felt lost without her, but you know what? I know that also is a part of a necessary change of maybe there's things that need to be corrected on her half and my half or whatever the situation. But the thing is like I am not a drill sergeant. It's my way or the highway. No, I look at change as to be something that you discern. You take time, you evaluate it. You don't always have to do it like a snap of a finger or a blink of an eye. You have to look at change and all the innovations. I mean, think about it. I never thought I would be live broadcasting, and I didn't know if I'd ever be a podcaster. I heard about it like 8 years ago, and I was like, what the hell's a podcaster? And then here I am making content. I never thought I would be on video, and here I am. I could produce to millions of people possibly or billions, but I don't know that. It's up to those people and really to share that message. But when you look at change, just remember the people that are trying to pull a, a cloak over your eyes, you got to understand their innovativeness is using the tools and tasks that you take advantage of by not taking change as a tool or taking change as an opportunity. When we focus on opportunities as well as what it takes away, we then can now have the discussion: why are people afraid of change? No one likes to be discounted or set aside or put to pasture. No one likes to feel that they can't be of value to society. When we think of our liveliness and we think of what is the best thing for us, we have to involve change and people and perspectives. But this is where I would encourage the youth. Take a time to look at your elders. Don't look at them as obtuse or angry and just bitter old people who don't get it. We understand your emotional value just as much. We were there once too, and some of us still are. Our maturity is the level of our discernment. How we decide about what goes in and what goes out is really going to be on a daily practice. Mindfulness is such an important thing. And when we think about these mindful things, people will attack me for what I've even said on the show. But you know what? Number one, I will not discriminate against people. Number one, if I discriminate to you, I'm basing it on, hey, I think you're stupid. And what does that qualify? Well, you can ask me privately and I'll tell you. But the thing is I can let any person sit next to me, have a conversation. I can sit at a table, no matter what color, language you speak, what creed you have, what religion you have. I don't let those things get in my way. And that is a powerful change. But see, I could say, the powers that be that are trying to manipulate our attention span, they'll argue you need to identify. categorize yourself. Categorize yourself based on the value in which I want from you. And I want people to go away from this conversation to think there is a positive outlet in all of this. And we are a part of that. By taking advantage of what we actually can do on a daily, being mindful, having conversations, share my table, share my food, share my water. If that's what needs, if it helps people in their mental health, then so be it. But I know the bigger value and what matters to me. That's the important thing, you know, and all I can say is that life is beautiful. It's not a tragedy. Well, that's all the time that I have for Rise and Grind. We'll see you all Wednesday, 7 a.m. I'll be releasing the topic tomorrow. So thank you so much who've listened to me live on Fireside, brand new platform that I'm using only audio. The video platform of this I'm using through not Restream. Oh yeah, it is Restream for YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, Twitter Spaces, and all that great stuff. So if you want to see me video, that's where I'm producing. And if you're on Wisdom, yes, Wisdom has been a great community that I've been a part of. I've got to thank Big TC for coming up on stage and adding some content, and seeing people come in and listen to my content. Just appreciate it. Sonia Sandera, thank you for the applause. Devon Dougherty, Daughtry, hey, thank you so much for coming by. Definitely. Roman Wyden, hey, thank you so much. These are some of the people that I've come in contact and had a semi-regular relationship. Kelly Swenson, thank you. Empress Q, thank you so much. And Daryl, and so many more. So I hope to all see you this Wednesday at 7 a.m. And keep making content. Share this talk if you can, whether you share it on YouTube, share it on Restream, or wherever you can find me. 72 the Architect, aka Jason B, or Jason Barajas. That's my real name. And thank you so much for all your time. Well, we'll see y'all next time, everybody. Take care.